Hi everyone, good morning and thank you for joining us today. My name's Amy and I'm the Communications Manager here at Moorpay. Today we're going to be talking about the topic of holiday entitlement and pay for furloughed employees. Before we begin, there are a couple of things to note. So firstly, we've got more than 500 people registered for today's webinar. So to keep things manageable, we have muted everybody's microphones. If you are facing any difficulties viewing the webinar or you've got some audio issues, you can let us know though. Just use the chat box, which is in the GoToWebinar panel. We are really keen to answer your questions as well. So in preparation for the live Q&A session, please post your questions in the question box throughout the webinar and we'll answer as many as possible when we get to the end of the presentation. After the webinar, we will send you a link to the recording. So we'll put this webinar on YouTube and we will also share a copy of the slides as well. So don't worry if you need to leave the webinar early or you're not in a position to take notes, it's not a problem. We will send everything to you as soon as it's available. Next, in terms of the structure of the webinar, I will begin by providing a quick overview of Moorpay for those of you who aren't familiar with us. And then I will pass you over to our wonderful host for today, who is Carl Hardcastle. After the main body of the session, we'll come to the live Q&A. So for those of you who aren't a customer of ours, I would like to introduce Moorpay. We provide payroll and HR software and managed services, and we've been around for more than 50 years, and we've got 10,000 happy customers all across the UK. Our promise is to make payroll and HR easy, and we do that by focusing on the delivery of 4 key things to our customers. So first of all is a simple onboarding. Second is software that is easy to use. Third is rich functionality in our software. And fourth is flexible services, which are delivered by a team of very dedicated payroll and HR experts. Moving on, I'd like to introduce your presenter for today, Carl Hardcastle. He is an employment law consultant here at Moorpay. He's been with us for more than 10 years and has over 20 years of experience in employment relations. What's more, Carl has received more 5-star Trustpilot reviews than you can shake a stick at. It's safe to say that our clients absolutely love him for his professional advice and his polite and friendly manner. So I will hand you over to Carl, who will take you through today's topic, which is holiday entitlement and pay for furloughed employees. So take it away, Carl.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I can just go over Amy's points again. Today, I'm keen that it's a two-way process. So yes, of course, I'm going to take you through a slide deck on furlough holiday, but I'm keen that you actually ask us questions as well, okay? So please feel free to ask questions. Also, as Amy just also said, these slides will be available. They'll be sent to you in a couple of days' time or so if you wish, or you can download them. So don't feel free that you've got to make loads of notes today. But before we move on, can I just point out the 5-star review thing that Amy kind of mentioned? That wasn't me. I didn't put that in there, by the way. So you might think, what kind of narcissist does that? But it's not me, I promise you. Okay, right, furlough. Cast your mind back to February of this year. If I said the word furlough to you, you'd look at me as if I was from a different planet. Then things change rapidly. Initially here at Moorpay, the advice line got a lot of calls about how do we furlough our staff? What do we have to do? How do we get them into furlough? What's the percentage rate of furlough payment? All the furlough questions. We sorted that. That was absolutely fine. But then we hit a second wave of questions. And the biggest question was, what happens to holiday pay? What happens to holiday accrual? What happens to holiday rights? What happens to employment rights? What happens to employers' rights? Just as importantly. This morning's presentation is not a flowery presentation. I am aware that some of you will have listened to me in the past and I like to talk around things. The problem that we've got with furlough is we're still 3 years away from any case law. So what we've got now are facts. What we don't have is some upper court judge's opinion that tells us how we implement furlough. So today is going to be reasonably punchy with facts and figures rather than any thought process on opinion. So if we want to click on Amy to the next slide about holiday entitlement for furloughed employees, one of the biggest questions we got is our staff that are on furlough, what holiday pay rates do they calculate at? And as you can see on the screen in front of you, there's two columns. The first column is most employees, and the second column is furloughed employees. Okay, let me briefly take you through this. Holiday entitlement is 5.6 weeks paid holiday per year. So your employees get at least 28 days or 5.6 weeks paid holiday per annum. An employee has the same holiday entitlement regardless of on any types of statutory leave, paternity, maternity, etc., etc. Your staff accrue holiday at 5.6 weeks holiday per year, full-time equivalent. And the third bullet point, an employee may request holiday at the same time as they're on sick, but cannot be required to take it off while sick. Okay, so that is standard employees, 28 days at least per annum, and they accrue it if they're sick, if they're healthy, if they're pregnant, if they're on maternity leave, if they're on paternity leave, adoption leave, etc., etc. Well, your employees at least 28 days or 5.6 weeks. That's where we were in February of this year. And then all of a sudden, March, April came, and even May for some employers, and we rattled onto the furlough, which is the second column. So furloughed employees, employees who are being placed on furlough continue to accrue statutory holiday entitlements. So you've got a guy on furlough at home watching Netflix at 80% of his wage, and he is still accruing holiday, exactly the same as if he was on your shop floor. And the final bullet point, the last bullet point on the bottom right, when they are working reduced hours, so we talk about flexi furlough, and the government's called it Flexible Furlough Scheme, or FFS, exactly. When they're on flexible working scheme, they continue to accrue holidays based on their contractual hours. So if you've got staff back on a part-time basis, on a flexible basis, they're still accruing holidays on their full-time hours. So basically, furloughed employees, they get holidays accrued on what they would have done if they're back working full-time. Okay, now let's nip on to the next slide of taking holidays. Okay, this is an important slide. When it comes to holidays, a lot of employers think the employee has the upper hand. I am going to Scarborough on the 15th of September, and you've got to put up with it. That's not the case. The law is very clear in this area. Your employees have the right to holidays, but you as an employer are in control of when they can take them. So you might have a rule of 2 off per department, or all holidays for fireworks factories can't be taken in October. Okay, it's perfectly right for you to have rules. So let's go through these rules. So your employees on furlough can take holiday without disrupting their furlough. The notice requirements for their employer requiring an employee to take leave or refuse a request for the leave continue to apply. So what that basically means is, if you wish, and we'll come on to this in a bit of depth, if you wish, you can force your employees to go on holiday whilst on furlough and claim back the furlough proportion of their pay. So if you've had people on furlough since April of this year, and you're thinking, crikey, their holiday entitlement is really starting to rack up, what you can do is you can force through, and I'll come on to this in a bit of depth in a second, but you can force through an employee to take a holiday. What you'll say to them is, you've got so many days, but in week X, you'll take that week as holiday. What I'll do is I'll pay you a kind of furlough rate of 80%, but I'll top it up to your full rate to 100%, but that week will be showed as a holiday. So employers are in a more stronger position than they think. Now, when we do these webinars, it always gets me a little bit nervous because I'm giving really broad brush advice. So if you have a holiday situation you wish to force with your employees, then if you're one of our wonderful customers, give us the call on the advice line that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we'll chat through on an individual basis. But you as employer, you can control, do you want to take the employer's holidays now, or do you want to push them down the line? And I'll come on to a slide later on that talks about rolling holidays over for 2 years, but more about that later. Okay, so you can insist your employees do take their holidays. We'll come on to a slide about that, but it's perfectly possible. So if you can just move on to the next slide where we look at calculating holiday pay, please. An employee can be on holiday, as we've discovered, whilst on furlough, but what should we pay them? Okay, let's look at the first point. If a furloughed employee takes holiday, the employer should pay their usual holiday pay in accordance with the WTR. So what we're effectively saying is if an employee is on furlough at 80% or 70% as we're going forward, you need to top that up to the balance of 100%. That's not open to debate. As I said at the top of this presentation, these are facts rather than opinion. Where the calculated rate is above the pay the employee receives while on furlough, again, the employer must pay up the difference. So furlough at the correct rate, 70%, 80%, soon to be less than that, you need to top up. Okay. If we just want to go on to the second slide, please, Emma. Holiday pay, whether the employee is on furlough or not, should be calculated in line with current legislation, i.e. based on the worker's usual earnings. What we've seen recently is quite a few employers take advantage of employees of saying, okay, then you can have that week as holiday, but we're going to base it on average earnings and your furlough rate is 80%, and therefore that's what you're going to receive in your holiday entitlement. That's incorrect. It has to be at 100%. Two issues you need to look at that. The first one is you don't want tribunal for a kind of deductions from earning. And the second thing is an employee, if they get speaking to a decent lawyer, they point out that's a breach of contract and you're in for constructive dismissal. So I'm aware there's a lot of HR professionals listening, but if you have an MD or a CEO that thinks that they can shave a few quid off here and there by paying holidays at a lower rate, then the answer is please don't do it. It's not just the 20% that you need to be worried about. It's deeper than that. It's constructive dismissal. It's 5 days in tribunal, and it's a payout that could be 10, 20, 30,000 pounds, and that's per employee. So again, I don't want to overemphasize this point, but if an employee on furlough wants holiday, 100% of their wages. Okay, I'm not going to talk through this because, as I mentioned at the top of this, these slides are going to be available. But just look at that third point. If they have variable hours of pay, their holiday pay is calculated on an average of the previous 52 weeks of remuneration. Okay, that sounds quite a big ask of HR professionals to go back into payroll data for 52 weeks, and it is. Previously, prior to April of this year, before the law changed, it was 12 weeks, which was dead easy to do, but regretfully the law has changed, so it must be at least 52 weeks. That should even out any spikes for Christmas and Easter and summer holidays. Okay, if we can, Amy, if we could move on to the next point, please, about holiday pay. First bullet point, an employee usually works bank holidays, then the employer can agree to that is included in the furlough grant payment. Okay, we're coming back to the 100% argument that I've probably over-egged a little bit this morning, but a lot of organisations, a lot of our clients, such as care homes, such as retail outlets, bank holiday is just another bit of days working for these people. So I'm minded with bank holidays coming up very shortly, we need to address this. We can do one of two things. You can either say to your members of staff that are on furlough, you can have bank holiday Monday as a bank holiday if you wish, but you'll see there it's at 100% of normal pay. So what we do is we top up. Alternatively, what you can say to your employees, look, you're on furlough. There is no effectively bank holiday Monday to be had. What we can do is kick the liability down the road. So rather than have the bank holiday Monday now, why don't we have it in November, December, January, February, whenever it comes up? Okay, so you can defer that, as you'll see from the last bullet point, until a later date. But you must ensure your employee receives their full holiday entitlement. Just because they're on furlough doesn't mean to say that their holiday accrual stops or pauses or decreases, it remains, in some cases, regretfully, precisely as the same as your work every day. However, you're probably thinking financially, we're not in a great point right now to be paying 100% of payouts, even with the furlough scheme. So the government did announce a scheme that can kick the problem down the path. So if you want to just move it on to the next slide, please, Amy. And it's about carrying annual leave forward. Yeah, the government had a bit of a problem. They announced furlough. Everybody rushed to furlough. A huge proportion of our client staff were on furlough. And then the government worked out that what was going to happen is these staff were going to come back and try and build the economy in August, September, etc. And what they would say is, well, I've got 20 days holiday. I wish to take them all now. So not only have been sat on the sofa on furlough, they were now going to be sitting on the sofa on annual leave. So the government introduced a plan so we could kick the problem down the road. Okay, so they introduced a bit of legislation. And for the nerds amongst us, it was called, are you ready for this? This is catchy. The Working Time Coronavirus Amendment Regulations 2020 in March 2020 of this year, where they kicked the problem down the path. Effectively, what they said to staff is you can effectively take 2 years to have this year's holiday entitlement. Now, on the screen, you can see there, it says the standard rules. If anybody needs to use the loo or anybody wants to grab a coffee, now is a good time to do that, because these are the standard rules. This is what was in place in January and February of this year. I'm not going to go through this because it is irrelevant. We are not in these situations anymore. What previously used to happen, though, now again, the nerds amongst us will hopefully take this. I mentioned 5.6 weeks. What happened is that you can see there that there's 4 weeks. They're the European holidays, where Europe said to us back in 1998, where we were allowed to take 4 weeks annual leave. And Tony Blair's government increased that by 1.6 weeks, or to take it to 28 days. So they give Tony Blair gave you the European holidays of 4 weeks, and then the Blair government gave you the extra 8 days, the stat days, to bring us to 28. And there were certain rules that this can be rolled over. Part of it can be retained. I'm not going to bore you because we're not there anymore. If you want to read those, please read those in your own time. But I've got one eye on the clock, and the last thing I want is a telling off from Amy for being kind of overrunning. So if we can quickly move on to our new way of living. Okay, so as said previously, the government has introduced a temporary new law with the disruption of COVID-19, and that allows for the majority of the holidays to be pushed over a 2-year period. So you can say to your staff, you can't have your holiday now. I'm trying to rebuild my business, rebuild my coffee shop, rebuild my bar. I refuse holidays now. I will be pushing those back over the next 2 years. Now, one of the questions that get asked quite a lot is, what 2-year period are you talking about? Are you talking about 2 years from the date of inception of the legislation in March 2020? Are you talking 2 years from when an employee asks for a holiday? Or are you talking about 2 years from our holiday year starting or ending? And the answer is, I don't know. As we said at the top of this, government rushes out legislation, and it takes several years in appeal courts to work out what's going on. How I like to think of it, and a dear old barrister once told me, the politicians and the House of Lords make the laws up, okay? So it's the equivalent of the politicians putting a bat and a ball in a field, and the appeal judges go on to decide if they've created baseball or cricket. It really is that varied. So you as practical HR professionals, the figure is 2 years. Which date it applies to, nobody knows, but it's fair to say you've got time to rebuild your business, put it on the front foot, and in 12 months, 18 months, you can start your staff taking holidays and actually make them take holidays rather than they request them. Okay, so that's the new carryover rule. You'll note there's a phrase in there just before we moved on. where in the grey box in the last sentence, it says reasonably practical. So you as an employer need to decide what is reasonably practical. Okay, if we can move on to that, I just want to flesh that out a little bit if we could, Amy. Okay, holidays are a health and safety legislation bit of law. The idea behind them is that they are taken as regularly as possible because you don't want tired workers at your work. So if they fall into a mincing machine and they've not had a day off for 10 months, then you may well be liable for that. So as I said previously, we can delay holidays for up to 2 years, but realistically, you should be encouraging holidays as and when your employees need them, as and when your business allows, as reasonably practical. And here are some key considerations. Okay, has the business faced an increase in demand due to the coronavirus? We've got clients that have been hit very hard by the virus. We've got clients that have done rather well. We've got one client that manufactures PPE. So needless to say, they are rejecting holidays left, right and centre. So if you can demonstrate to your employee there's a significant increase in demand, that's a perfectly good reason to refuse holidays. Okay, the second bullet point. To what extent is the business workforce disrupted by the coronavirus? Well, if you've got staff on furlough, you run a theatre, the theatre's not coming back anytime soon, what you might be doing is to say it's reasonably practical to be running holiday now. So you can say to your staff, I will give you twice as much notice as the holiday's duration. So i.e. 2 weeks holiday, 2 weeks notice for 1 week's holiday, or 4 weeks notice for 2 weeks holiday. So if your staff are on furlough, it's reasonably practical for you to run the holiday now as opposed to push it back over the 2 years. Third bullet point, what is the health of the employee and how soon do they need to take a period of rest? If you have got an employee with cancer that's undergoing treatment, saying to them, sorry mate, you're not having a holiday for the next 2 years or next year is not a reasonably practical excuse. If they have chemotherapy and they are tired, it is perfectly acceptable for you to be issuing holidays now as opposed to down the path. So again, it's a common question we hear is, yes, staff can have holidays, staff are legally entitled to holidays, yes, employers can control that, but it has to be reasonable, okay? And just saying that, oh, well, we don't want to pick up any agency fees is not a reasonable excuse. Okay, the final bullet point. What is the ability of the remainder of the available workforce to cover the employee going forward? Basically, have we got the staff to do it? So if you're saying to staff, you can't have holiday, and they're saying, well, we've got more workers than we have work, and that's not going to be reasonably practical. So you need to run your business with these key considerations. And as I said previously, you're probably just thinking denying holiday for no good reason is a decent thing to do. And then the answer is not, because you're running the risk of constructive dismissal and the nasty things in tribunal. As I said earlier in this broadcast, if your clients of ours, please give us a call if you want to deny somebody holiday or give some extra circumstance to their holiday, and we'll advise on a one-to-one basis. It does make me nervous giving broad brush advice. If you're not clients of ours, well, first of all, why not? We'd like you to be clients of ours. Please contact us or we can contact you. But the second thing, if you're not our clients, you don't want to be our clients, I would ask you to seek decent, independent HR legal advice on this matter. If you're clients of ours, give us a call. The advice line runs 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. If you take the insurance product from us, you're fully covered. So in the event that you get somebody walk out claiming constructive dismissal, then we pick up the cost, or your insurance picks up the cost, and not yourself. And I'm not here to scaremonger, but tribunal, their penalties for tribunal are not means tested. So it doesn't matter if you're Apple, Microsoft, or the local fish and chip shop or the local post office, the penalty is the same. Okay, so we've talked about that. Let's just, if we can, Amy, reasonably practical, let's nick it onto the next slide about handling leave that's carried forward. That's very wordy. I'm not going to read it, and you'll be pleased to learn about that. So maybe this is the second time you can get a coffee. The principle is there, is how you manage it, how you carry holiday over. Again, these slides are available, so you can have a look at them in the cold light of day in the next 2 or 3 days' time. But we need to encourage staff to take holidays when reasonably practical. If it is not practical due to your business needs, then that is some detail about how you carry the leave forward. Let's move on, because that is as dry as ditch water. But it's very worth it. It needs to be there because you need as HR professionals to understand what you need to do. Okay, I think we've got about 5 minutes before I wrap it up, maybe 10 minutes. So let me go through one of the questions that gets asked of us most of all. Here at Moorpay on the HR advice team, employment law team, what we get is HR professionals and business owners from SME ringing us up and says, look, all this holiday accrual has been ticking away on furlough. We don't want to bother about pushing it over 2 years. We don't want to bother about having the holiday leave now. What we do want to do is pay the guy his holiday pay so we can all crack on. And the answer, please, is no. A common question from an employee, can I have the cash instead? And the answer is no. You'd be breaking the law by that. So the holiday is there to be taken. The holiday is there to be pushed back over 2 years. The holiday is even there to be forfeited in certain circumstances, but it cannot be taken as cash unless you've got an employee that leaves the business. Okay, that's the only time you should be paying holiday pay on the pay slip. So please carry the leave forward if you wish. But you can point out there in the first bullet point at the top of the screen, on the second sentence, it is unlawful for employers to prevent employees from taking holiday of which they are entitled. However, if the employee leaves the holiday, the employer must pay the employee for the untaken leave. So again, it's not a payment in lieu whilst they're in employment. They have to take the leave. Okay, it is to be taken whenever you want over the next 2 years, whenever the employee wants over the next 2 years, that manages and fits your business and fits their needs, not to be paid as cash. So just before we start to wrap up, and I appreciate this morning has been a little bit of a whistle stop. There's a heck of a lot to cram into 30 minutes, so I do apologise for that. But it's one of the biggest questions we get asked. Employees on furlough, what are their rights? What are our rights? And hopefully this morning we've kind of gone through those, albeit in the last 30 minutes. And I appreciate you busy people with lots to do, but it's important that I get the point across about where you sit with your staff and what they are and aren't entitled to. So, in conclusion, staff can be on holiday and on furlough. You are allowed to claim the furlough money whilst you're on holiday, but you must top it up to 100%. The caveat is the Chancellor keeps changing the rules. This is correct of today. Here we are at 10:30. What the Chancellor will announce at lunchtime or this afternoon or this week, I do not know. So currently and correctly, staff can be on furlough and on holiday, but you need to top up the money to 100% of their pay. Second bullet point on conclusions is holiday pay is calculated on regular earnings. So take your employees back to where they were at the beginning of this year. That's where we need to be doing the holiday calculation over 52 weeks and not the furloughed earnings. The third point is there's nothing special about bank holidays. We've got a bank holiday coming up. Your staff can either take it and you top up the pay, or you have a chat with them, and with their approval, we can kick it down the path, and you can pay that if you're cash poor right now. And a lot of companies are, where you'll say, we'll continue where you're on furlough, and we'll pay you your bank holiday, and you can take it in September, October, November, December, whenever, because we can push those holidays forward. You are in control. And again, another big point from this conversation, holidays can be pushed over 2 years, where you absolutely need to. You can't deny an employee their holidays if you have no good reason, no justifiable reason. But if you're trying to rebuild your business, I know there's companies out there that have been discussing saying we need all hands to the pump right now. You can push those holidays over 2 years. So if you've taken anything away from my presentation, there are the 4 main points. So we've hit 30 minutes on the nail, so I'd like to hand you back to Amy, and I think we may have a bit of a Q&A session. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Carl. That was great. So yeah, now for the questions, and we have had lots through, so we'll get through what we can. If you've still got questions, then just keep dropping them into the question box, and we'll work through what we can. Anything else, we'll come back to you separately. So the first question, and Carl has touched on some of this, but just so that listeners can be really clear on the answer. An employee is back at work from furlough and wishes to take annual leave. We approve they can take the time off work. However, we can't approve it as annual leave as we can't afford to top it up to the 100% whilst also covering their absence. So the question is, can we put them back on furlough for this period, or would we have to put it as unpaid leave?
That's a very, very good question. The furlough scheme was introduced to prevent unemployment and protect employment. You using it as a kind of a holiday tool. Technically, if they meet all the criteria, you could do that, but the danger is that you have a HMRC inspection, or alternatively, the employee falls out with you at a later date and runs to the authorities. It's risky. It depends on what your appetite for risk is. Personally, I'd advise against it, but if you want to do it, take your chance that you can do that. But what I'd rather do is, if you can't afford to pay the holiday, that's a justifiable reason, and you say to them, no, I need you at work, your holiday request is denied, please attend work and help build my business back up.
Okay. Another question. We brought back an employee who had been made redundant at the end of March. We brought them back onto the payroll to furlough them. Did they accrue annual leave whilst on furlough, i.e. from April the 20th?
Regretfully, you're not going to like the answer. Almost certainly yes, is the point. If they were classed as an employee, if they were on your payroll, you could, and I hate to give this advice because it's less than professional, you could chance your arm at it, but if challenged, then if they have been in your employment all over summer, they will have been accruing holiday pay. Sorry, I've not got a better, more happier answer for you. Do apologise.
Next question. Holiday pay for variable staff is higher than furlough. We pay the higher amount, but what can we claim for furlough?
That's an exceptionally good question, and it's a question I'll give you my thoughts and opinions on, but HMRC have the last word of that. What the danger is, you pay this holiday money out and you can't recover it, and that's the risk for your business. So I'm going to come back to the 52-week average for calculating what a week's holiday looks like, and from that you can take the variables down to the different days, i.e. if they work 5 days, then a fifth of the weekly amount. You should be okay with that. But as I said, the problem with furlough, it's been changing now for several months on a weekly basis. The advice we were given out in April, May, June is different to what we're giving out now because the rules continue to change. So hopefully that's a little bit of help. But if not, it's a HMRC question rather than an employment law question. Okay.
Excellent. If someone who is furloughed and goes on holiday abroad, do they need to take this from their holiday allowance as they are unable to return to work within 24 hours as per their contract? And is this the same for UK holidays?
Yeah, we've got to be a little bit careful with this one because we're into the grounds of race discrimination. If we're saying to an employee, if you are at home in Portugal, then you must take it as holiday, because the guy may argue, well, if I was holidaying in the north of Scotland, it will still take me 6 hours to get back, but it would take me from Portugal. So furlough is not, it doesn't depend on geography. So technically an employee could be in Spain, Portugal, Italy. If they can't get back in time, it becomes a disciplinary issue, and it becomes that they come off furlough and then into a disciplinary scenario. Part of the furlough scheme is they must make themselves available for work. And if they're European based, they can get back within 24 hours. And if they can't, it's a disciplinary issue. It's not a furlough issue.
Another question, where the furlough rate is higher than the worker's normal rate, what rate should be used to calculate holiday pay? And just to note, they've said that the employee is still on flexible furlough.
Right. The problem with flexible furlough is the earnings are up and down, left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
As I said in this presentation, it's a 52-week average prior to any furlough period.
Hmm.
So it's their normal remuneration rather than their furlough pay.
Yeah, okay. Quick, I don't know if this will be a more of a payroll-y one, but I have paid 100% holiday pay and not claimed 80% furlough in July for the flexibly furloughed employees. Can I add the backdated claim for the 80% furlough to my next furlough claim? That one that we...
Again, yeah, it's more of a payroll, but I'll try and
Yeah.
answer it, try and be helpful. My understanding from the furlough scheme is there's no drawdown. You effectively have to apply and get money in real time. So retrospective claims. I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong, but regretfully, the ship may have sailed.
Yeah, we've actually got quite a few payroll ones. So what I will do for those people, we will go back to you after this webinar and get our payroll experts on just to make sure that we're getting the 100% accurate advice. Not that we don't trust Carl with the payroll stuff, but he is our HR expert. So I think it's unfair to go with all the payroll questions.
Yeah.
So another more HR-y one. So as furloughed staff are coming back at different times, can require different number of days to be carried over depending on their return date. Have I phrased that correctly? As furloughed staff are coming back at different times, maybe can they require a different number of days to be carried over depending on their return date?
It all depends on business needs. Ultimately, you are in control of holidays. Yes, staff have to have those holidays. But if you have staff with different variable rates of holiday accrual, then they can be taken when's best for you if you have a genuine business need that you need to delay them. Alternatively, if you wish to scrub off the holiday, whilst now you can claim some of it back on furlough, you're free to do that as well. Ultimately, if you're a client of ours, we'll take this offline and please give me a call and discuss on an insured basis. But yeah, you are in control.
There's a good question here around the new rules of carrying leave over. So the question is, do the carried over days have to be split evenly over those 2 years?
Short answer is no. Whatever's best for your business. The government or the legislation says it's over. The holidays will be taken over 2 years. If you want to scrub them off next year rather than push them into the year after, you're free to do that, and also vice versa. I'm going to put my HR hat back on for a second and just say, just be aware that if somebody's saying I've got a daughter's wedding or I've got I need time off for a funeral, please be sensitive. But no, it doesn't have to be evenly split. The holidays can fall as and when over 2 years that you and your employee deem fit. But your employee cannot demand all holidays are pushed over 2 years. Likewise, they can't demand that all holidays are taken now.
Yeah, okay. Another question here. So our staff have signed a new contract to accept an 80% salary during the lockdown period. If they take holidays during this period, should they get paid exactly the same as their new contract says if they are working on these days?
If staff have agreed, first of all, their previous accrual is in the bank that have been earned at 100%. So they will say, before my drop to 80%, I'd accrued 3, 4, 5, 6 days. That's protected. But going forward, if your staff have agreed to a 20% pay cut, then a regular week's income is 80% of previously, so 20% less, and therefore that's a regular income that's used for calculating holidays. So going forward, if staff have agreed to a 20% pay cut, then a day off on holiday, that will accrue to a 20% less than previous, so pay them less.
Yeah, okay. We have paid our furlough staff full pay and shift allowance whilst they have been on furlough. We also asked them to take 10 days up to the end of May. Going forward with flexible furlough, what advice would you give on tackling holidays?
All comes back, as I said previously, to the needs of your business. If and I don't know, because we come to these questions blind, if you have a business with zero demand, then feel free to kind of push through the holidays now and say, well, I require you to take holidays, so therefore I'm giving you 2 weeks notice of a 1 week holiday. Alternatively, if your business needs are high, then you can robustly defend that and say your holidays are refused, come back and work now. It all depends, again, coming back to one of my earlier slides of the needs of the business, you can be flexible about it.
Yeah, okay. And there's a question here around claiming on the furlough grant, I guess, when people are on leave. So can we claim 1 week of flexible furlough for an employee who has returned full-time this month from furlough, but is taking a week's holiday next week?
If they meet the criteria, HMRC's criteria, then yes, they possibly could do that. Again, I just double check with HMRC because ultimately I don't want to make any firm commitments here and then HMRC push that back because they've changed the rules in the last 20 minutes. But the purpose of the FFS, the flexible furlough scheme, is that it's just that, it is flexible. So potentially yes, but please check with HMRC.
Yeah. When allocating holiday for someone on furlough and you are topping the 80% to the 100%, do you class the day as a full day or is it just 20% of a holiday day?
Sorry, Emma, could you read that again?
So when allocating holiday for someone on furlough and you're doing the top up of the 80% to 100%, do you class that as a full day of holiday, I'm assuming, or just 20% of a holiday day?
No, it's a full holiday.
Yeah,
so what you're doing is you're marking on your HR records you've had a full day's holiday, but the mathematics behind it is 80% furlough, 20% your own money. But the holiday records, the HR records, demonstrate that you've had 1 day off. Yeah.
Makes sense. Can the employee be paid holiday pay in lieu?
In holiday pay in lieu, if you're talking about what was mentioned earlier, that I will just pay them the holiday money, then the answer is no, it would be unlawful. So if somebody comes to your, bangs on your office door and says, I want to take some of my holidays as cash, the answer is absolutely not, it's unlawful. Unless, number one, you want to take a risk, and clearly I don't advise that. And number two, you can do it if they are leaving in their final pay scheme, final pay slip, but what we're not allowed to do is just pay people holiday pay for leave not taken. I'm going to slip my anorak back on again if that's okay, Amy. Holiday pay is working time directive stuff, which is health and safety legislation. So the danger is if you pay your holiday pay out as cash, like a slush fund, and then you have somebody falls into a machine or somebody has an accident at the wheel of the car, you may well be liable. So please, regretfully, it'd be an easy solution for all. I appreciate that, but don't pay holiday pay out in cash. It has to be taken as annual leave.
Yeah. Can you please confirm whether holiday pay is offset against salary sacrifice? Is that one for?
Yeah, that's probably, I can talk around it. That's possibly one. Yeah. It's salary sacrifice can be for, as you know, childcare and kind of company cars and various things. So you probably need to check with the service provider on that one. But yeah, again, if I can just duck that one, but indeed, it would depend on the service provider.
Yeah, okay, we'll come back to you on that one, Sarah. Another question, if we paid our furloughed employees 100% of their salary whilst they were furloughed, including bank holidays, which are part of their annual leave entitlement, do we have to add the bank holidays back onto their entitlement when they return from furlough?
I'd like to have a little more detail on this, but the short answer is no. If you can demonstrate on pay slips and things like that that they've taken a day's bank holiday and they've been paid at 100%, you can demonstrate that they've taken a full day's annual leave, and therefore that will be reflected on the HR records.
Great. And then there's another question from someone on the paying in lieu of holiday. So they've questioned, so, you know, is it not ever in terms of making that payment? And they've given the example of someone coming back from maternity leave who might have huge amounts to take. It's a good question.
It's a very good question. Indeed, yes, somebody will come back from maternity leave. We've had a lot of questions, you won't be surprised, about maternity and furlough, because at the end of somebody's maternity leave, they go on to zero pay. So furlough looks quite attractive. So they say to an employer, can I come off mat leave and go on furlough leave, please? I appreciate that that's not your question, but it is an area we've discussed in great detail. But the holidays, no. If your maternity lady wants holidays paying, again, I come back to my point previously of absolutely not. What is a good trick though is to say that, okay, you want to come back off maternity leave on the, let's say, 1st of September. Why don't we leave you on furlough leave until your holidays have been scrubbed off? That's one way of doing it, so you can pick up the furlough scheme money. But ultimately, no, unless the employment is broken, i.e. ended, then the maternity lady will be due her holidays. But again, coming back to, you can kick the can 2 years down the road.
Yeah. Can you force an employee to take holiday even if they don't want to?
Yes. And it's been done fairly regularly. Again, coming back to double the notice to the length of holiday. So you give somebody 2 weeks notice of a 1 week holiday. So they can say to you, I don't want a holiday. And the answer is tough, you're having it. So just double the ratio, 2 weeks for a week, 2 weeks notice for a, you can do the maths, but double the notice for the length of the holiday. If your employee says, I don't want a holiday, the answer is tough.
Yeah. Right, we've got quite a few more questions, but I feel like we're probably running out of time here. So what we'll do, we'll wrap things up, but for those of you whose question hasn't been answered, we will come back to you this week. So whether it's an employment law related question, Carl and I will come back to you, or if it's a payroll question, myself and one of our payroll experts will come back to you. But thank you so much for all your questions. And in the meantime, while you wait to hear from us, I'd just like to point you to our Knowledge Centre. There's a whole host of information in here. We've actually just updated the Employment Law and HR Legislation Guide, which is in the resources section. So have a little look on here. It's on our website. There's also lots of blogs written by our experts. We share these on our social channels. So follow us on LinkedIn and you'll see these in your newsfeed as we publish them. Carl and I hope that you found today's webinar helpful. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Carl, for being wonderful as ever and hosting and answering all of the questions. We will close the webinar now, but we hope you have a very lovely day. And as mentioned, we will follow up with the recording, we'll follow up with the slides, and we'll get back to any questions we've not been able to answer. Thanks so much and have a good day.
Thank you.